Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organization sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet.
Welcome to episode 52 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. Early on in my journey into Enterprise Excellence, I came across a pivotal book that helped me and the people I work for understand how they could support and sustain an excellence journey. The book was Creating a Lean Culture, written by Mr David Mann. I'm so pleased to have David on the show with us today to share knowledge and insights into the work he has been doing with the lean management system, a critical approach to sustaining excellence journeys. Let's get into the episode. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Brad. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it, David. It's such a thrill. David, what's your backstory? Like, what significant moments brought you into this place of being involved in continuous improvement, lean, and this critical factor of, lean management?
Well, it's a sort of a twisting road. I started out as a young man as a graduate student in psychology, got a PhD in psychology, and learned a bunch of things that you ordinarily wouldn't think about. I mean, it was a research degree, so I was learning the sort of a version of a scientific method, if you will. So my wife was working for the United States Attorney in Detroit, where we lived. So she would represent agencies of the United States in court, and we wanted to move to a less frenetic place than Detroit. So we did. We moved to where we have lived since then, on the west side of the state, over by Lake Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Nice.
And I had worked for a consulting company after graduate school, and the guy who hired me in Detroit had been hired by a company in Grand Rapids. And so, for better or for worse, he hired me again. So I started working for a manufacturing company, and I didn't really do that much good for a number of years. But there were a couple of young engineers at the company who got interested in this thing called lean, and they got in touch with John Shook, who was the first American hired by Toyota when Toyota was going to open their assembly plant in Long Beach, California, a mothballed General Motors plant that had failed. So that's a whole other story, very interesting story. But so I got involved in the lean effort that John's group brought into Steelcase, the company that I worked for. And one of the changes that came out of all of this after a couple of years was a change in the factory organization, from departments isolated from one another, specialized, like there would be a weld department, a paint department, an assembly department, an upholstery department, all separated by months and months of inventory. It was incredible. I consider myself a person of normal stature, and I'd walk through the factories, and I couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of me. There was, these big steel inventory tubs that you see in factories, stacked up 40 feet. It was unbelievable. So part of the change from the mass production batch and queue system to the flow and pull system was a change in the pay system. So production operators, factory floor guys and gals had, for the past 90 years been paid on a piece rate basis. So the more inventory you made, the more money you earned. It was a direct feedback loop for just producing more and more and more stuff that would be stacked higher and higher and higher and higher. And that was going to change. So they asked me, or I volunteered, I don't remember, but we put together an approach for preparing supervisors, first-line supervisors, to answer questions about the change in their pay system. They were going from piece rate to day rate, from being sort of an individual entrepreneur at their machine to being a member of a much larger group. And it turned out the scheme that we worked out was pretty effective. I don't want to go into a great deal of detail of that, but we asked the supervisors to write down on cards what are the questions that they felt that their employees who reported to them, what were their questions, and then we'd shuffle them up and deal them out, and these table groups, we'd have the table write an answer to the question. So we didn't give them the answer. That we had a pay guy come in and describe the new pay system, and then they answered based on their understanding of that. So we sort of wondered, gee, I wonder if that's going to work. I started going out to the factory floors. There were a dozen of them that I called on. It's the best job I ever had. And go out and go to the floor, talk to the supervisors, and ask them, how's it going? As the lean transformations happened, value stream by value stream by value stream, and it turned out they were very comfortable talking about the pay system. But that was the only part that they were comfortable with, because this is right. Remember, you've got this unbelievable quantity of inventory. You're never going to run out of parts. Wow. And now you're like hand to mouth. And if something went wrong, you were going to run out of parts.
Yeah.
And in the past, that had been that was a no-no.
Yeah. You
never ran out of parts. So now, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this new system work? And what we found, and this was repeatedly, that pretty much the day, or at most the week after the project team left, the project team would have redesigned the floor and greatly reduced the inventory, linked previously isolated operations. They were putting in flow and pull. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that supervisors, they always had been good at talking to people, and they had done a very good job of talking to people about the pay system. So we'd prepared them for that, but they didn't know what to do in the context of these new production organizations and arrangements. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It was beyond interesting. Yeah. The day the project team left, basically the whole arrangement would fall apart.
Yeah.
Because both the people doing the work and the people supervising the work didn't know what to do for the care and feeding of a flow and pull production process. Mm. So I'd go scratch my head and talk to a supervisor and say, I don't know, I can't tell what's going on here. Mm. So, well, what if you did something like this? And I'd, scratch something out on a piece of paper and supervisor would say, well, I don't know, I'll try anything. I'll try that.
Yeah.
And so we started developing in this trial and error way a set of tools, behaviors, and practices that end up being the lean management system.
Yeah, nice.
A lot of emphasis on what you can see, visual controls, so that you wouldn't have to go to a computer terminal and look at a bunch of numbers that were meaningful to maybe someone in finance or engineering, but in terms of running your department, not very helpful. So these became like a hour by hour production tracking chart. That was the, on a flip chart, right? That was how you could tell, are we having a good day? Are we having a bad day?
Yeah.
How many greens do we have? How many reds do we have? And because one of the interesting things is people in factories, in my experience anyhow, people in manufacturing are used to being held accountable because they're supposed to ship at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So like that, we got to, we have to do what's expected of us and what the customers are expecting. So the reds were not a problem in the factory. Maybe it's because in the past they were used to being yelled at when when they were off schedule, which I'm pretty sure was true. Not in an abusive way necessarily, but it was brought to their attention that they'd fallen short. So they were used to that. People in offices, and we later expanded the same set of tools, behaviors, and practices in office settings, which from an organizational standpoint was really interesting, but it was not nearly as much fun as working in the shop floor, from my point of view. But people in offices, they're uncomfortable seeing red. That was something they had to get used to because no one yelled at them.
Yeah, it could be seen easily as personal failure, having a red come up in that scenario.
Yeah. And it had also been very hard to tell because, in the factory, either the stuff is there and it's supposed to be, or the stuff is there and it's not supposed to be, or the stuff is there and there's too much of it. But in the office, you're just, sitting down, watching your screen, and all the actual information is hidden in the system. Anyhow, it turned out that the approach works both in the office and in the factory.
Go to enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com/downloads to download a lean management system form David has kindly provided. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future. Let's get back into the episode. Yeah, it was an interesting experiment that you had early on, David, isn't it? Like having a psychology background, that'd be a major help. It's funny how many great authors like yourself in this space, like Jeff Leiker's got the psychology background too. Like a lot of it's about what goes on in the mind, isn't it? And having that early base in that would have been an amazing start. But then you had this experiment early on where you had success with the pay system, but you saw that reorganization into more of a pull-based flow system start to crumble when the experts went away. And it's such a common story, isn't it? Such a common story. I've been through it myself.
Yeah, and you're sort of standing in the middle of chaos and you don't know what to do. Whereas before you were, you knew all the levers to pull and the buttons to push.
Yeah.
Now all that was gone.
Yeah. And
Dan,
the key elements then, like the visual system you put in, where you then made really the health of the system visual, so you could then see within a moment. That was the first key element of the lean management system. What were the other key elements of the lean management system that you saw evolve over time?
Well, the core ones were, so you've got the visual control so you can tell what's going on. And so lean is not about solving problems, it's about finding them.
Yeah.
Right. That's Taiichi Ohno.
Yeah.
Lean's about finding problems. So the production chart brings the problems to the surface. And now the question is, so what should we do?
Mm-hmm.
So the production tracking chart in some physical, preferably, but sometimes electronic forms, gets reviewed in the supervisors department the next day. What kind of data do we have? When we have a red, we're looking for a problem statement on the production tracking chart, which is there was something you had that you didn't want, or there was something you wanted that you didn't have. Just real simple stuff to sort of jog people's thinking. So the production tracking chart goes to an accountability meeting, a daily accountability meeting, where typically you'd have some of the support groups there, because the production people are busy working on production in most cases, but you might have an engineer, maybe somebody from maintenance, occasionally other support group specialties, once in a while HR or accounting, production control, that kind of thing. And you would get where's my prop? Here's my prop. So on a Post-it note, the supervisor writes an action, a verb noun action statement that's going to go. In this case, it's an assignment for me. It says follow up with production and inventory control and a part number. And that would get written on the Post-it note. And then the accountability board is a matrix of names. So, Brad, David, Marianne, etc. With so those are the rows, and the columns are dates, day by day by day. And the supervisor, or maybe the superintendent, asks me, when do you think you can get this done? And so we're making a deal here that I'll get back to you day after tomorrow. So he takes, or she takes the Post-it note with this task on it, this task assignment, puts it in the row with my name in the column for day after tomorrow. And so the red-green applies here as well. If I get this done by day after tomorrow, when that item, going down the column for that date, if I say, yes, I talked to so-and-so, here's what I learned, and we've got some next steps. So that gets green on that Post-it note. I don't know if I have a green one here, but I'd get like a green dot.
Yeah.
And if it's overdue, it gets a red dot.
Yeah.
It's not to shame anybody, but the reality is, you can't always get everything done that you planned on. So it turns out that it makes it easy or easier to follow up on things. And when the daily accountability meeting includes sort of the close-in representative of support groups who are going to be working in this area, they can get that done typically pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love that. Because also, too, there's two things you mentioned in there, Dave, I think is very powerful, too, is that you've got that visuality at the front line with the team, and you can collate the visual controls and see what happened yesterday and focusing on the red. But you mentioned having in this next level gathering support people. You're really pulling together the key people that need to work together to be able to help the front line perform, help the front line flow, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
Help the front line overcome challenges, because they can't deal with everything themselves, can they? They're busy during the day, so there's not necessarily every issue they can fix themselves. They need this strong support. In a way, you're describing servant leadership, but servant cross-functional collaboration to go, right, how do we overcome these problems? And we visualize that also, so we've got that accountability ourselves.
Yeah. There's another piece to it too, that the psychologist in me seems like it's powerful. subtle but powerful. So you've been a manager, I've been a manager, and managers have discretion to define things that are problems that they think need to be worked on. And so you can do that, and then you find some resources and they work on the problem that you've identified as a problem. Frontline people have no discretion to define something that's a problem and never, be listened to. But this way, they get to you have this sort of this idea of hearts and minds, and what do people talk about if they have families? What do they talk about at their family dinner table? And you can imagine a frontline person saying, that problem. This is now their family dinner at the table. That problem my mom was complaining about at work. Oh, Mom, we hear about it all the time. Well, today we drove a stake through its heart.
Yeah.
And there's the stake.
Yeah.
So it's a way of showing respect for people that directly reflects the respect that we have for an individual, because the problem that she experienced at work and has experienced on and off for a long time, that now is going to get some work done.
Yeah.
And be resolved. Another piece of this, a colleague of mine that I worked with pretty closely was running a plant in another state, down in Texas, long way from Michigan. He's down in Texas. And he said, so he was the operations VP, and at the end of the financial year, his finance person came to him and said, where did all this savings in cost of goods sold come from? Because I didn't approve any big project of yours. This is just you think about a team leader, and this is jumping a little bit, but it would be like a team leader in a Toyota system. We called them zone leaders. It would be an hourly person. Maybe they get a little bit of extra pay, and they basically handle the things that come up at the front line, daily work assignments, problems people have, and so on. They're the ones typically who get these assignments.
Yeah.
So you figure, I'm a zone leader, and I can work on this for 15 minutes before lunch, and then another 15 minutes in the second half of the day, and you start adding up those quarter hours, and it's a lot. So these are resources who are already there. They're typically good thinkers, process-oriented thinkers, in my experience, that are out there. You just haven't recognized them yet. And now you've got, you have like 10 hours a month of people working on, invisibly working on process improvement.
Yeah.
And that stuff adds up.
Yeah.
So it's, so a lot follows from identifying a problem. If you respect that it's a problem for somebody else that has that's related to something read on a daily accountability board, and it goes on to rather an hour by hour tracking chart, to a daily accountability board, to a list of checked off improvements, and in fact it begins showing up in the organization's measures.
Yeah, I love it, David, too, the focus that this brings, and also the negative it can eliminate. Because I'm guessing I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where you don't have that type of system in an organization, and leaders are trying to fixate the things that they think are the problems. And so you have this frontline crew where they're going home complaining to their partners and their family about the problems they've got, but then they're also complaining that leadership's putting this money into this thing over here that's going to do nothing to help get things out better or stop these problems. We just need to put the effort in here. It's like there's this disconnect that often happens if you don't have something like the lean
That's
management.
right. So you end up with a much more complicated solution to something that is not quite the problem.
Yeah.
but you walk through a factory and you can see them.
Yeah. They wrote a funny one. I had a chap I work with at Ampol say to me, he was telling me a story once that he heard of a toothpaste manufacturer where they were getting defects through on unders and overs, actually empty tubes at the end of the line. And they put in this big vision system that cost millions of dollars, and they were struggling to get it working. And, and then they got it sort of working, but then a few weeks later, there was nothing coming through. There was no defects. And they went for a walk back up the line and they saw a blow dryer sitting on the side of the production line. And one of the operators had sort of got annoyed with it too and just put a blow dryer there that cost $20 from somewhere. And it was just blowing the empty ones off.
Oh, blowing them off. If it was empty, it was going to get blown off.
Yeah. So it just didn't even make it down to this $1 million vision system.
Right.
And detection.
Right. We're hiding the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there is a factory that I shouldn't name. I don't want to embarrass anybody. But this was in the furniture business. It was a European factory. And they had repeated complaints about the hardware, the small parts required to put these workstation elements together. So it was driving the factory crazy because they knew that they'd put them in there in the packaging as it went down the line. They installed a machine vision system in the pack area. So they've got this, pretty sophisticated camera, video recorder up here that was aimed in such a way that they could prove we put those parts in that package. Yet the field complaints kept on coming in. What was going on was that the people who were unpacking at the job site, the people who were unpacking the units said they had all this dunnage, just shreds of cardboard and who knows what other packing material. Yeah. And somewhere in that were the small parts that they needed to put the units together, and they were being thrown out, not on purpose, but because they just couldn't find them.
Yeah. They're dealing with the wrong problem.
Yeah. An expensive solution to not a problem. Yeah. But so it's in what I've read about Toyota and the conversations I've had with Toyota, deep Toyota people about respect for people. I think this is a different way of respecting people by actually asking them to contribute and help solve the problems that aggravate them every day.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Toyota does it wrong, but this was something that has had a big positive effect on the way people think about the place where they come to work every day.
Yeah.
Because they're listening to me.
Yeah, because who knows the problem better than the person who's actually dealing with it every day down there and their supervisor? Like that they are the people who are living it, breathing it, smelling it, seeing it. Like that's where your best shot is at actually knowing where the problem is in most cases.
Yeah, that's why those are the people, those are among the people that you want on a Kaizen team. Yeah. They're the ones who are, they can smell the problem, from 50 meters away. So they're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great episode with David about implementing a lean system into a business in a respectful way. David mentioned the power of creating visuals, being able to see challenges hour by hour, day by day at the front line, and creating the support above that frontline team of middle management, overcoming impediments and helping the teams at the front line achieve their goals. There is much more to come from this chat with David on the role of middle management and senior management can play in a lean transformation journey. We'll continue to deep dive into lean with David in part 2. which will be out next week. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others create a better future. Bye for now.